Hey everyone, and welcome to the first chapter of the course. We have been looking through the quick starters a little bit earlier, but now it's time to dive into a little bit more of the theoretical lines. And I really want to start this video by first explaining, giving you a little bit of an overview of what we are going to learn. So after bishop to d3, in the first chapter, we are not going to be looking at the very main lines which are taking on e4 and c5, but instead we're going to be tackling the sidelines. And before you skip this video, I really want to draw your attention to how important it actually is to be aware and sort of learn these sidelines on a regular basis, because I think not only in this particular bishop d3 French, but in general, at least from my personal experience, I feel like paying very big attention to the sidelines. It's really could be one of those things that helps you to get maybe from like FIDE master to international master level, where it can actually give a very nice boost in your chess. Because honestly speaking, most of the players, I mean, if you're let's say you're above maybe club player level, somewhere like 1800. Most of the players would be quite comfortable playing in the main lines, knowing the big ideas, the big plans, maybe knowing some pawn structures as well. And it's going to be like not as easy to outplay them there, although you should be able to by using, the theory and implementing your own game plan. But the fact of the matter is that if you surprise someone in the opening, then there are like big chances that their play will be suboptimal. Let's just put it that way. And this can also we can implement this strategy, or it can be implemented against us. So in this video, we're mainly gonna be focusing on how to reply to those sidelines. But I wanted to give you this tip that I think I don't really think you should learn these moves by heart. Like, for example, in this video, we're going to be covering the moves knight c6, a6, h6, and f5. And I don't think you should really know these moves like by heart. I think you just need to have a sort of a wider understanding of the main ideas. And, just when you see these moves, the main goal of this video is that you're not going to be shocked over the board. And you, maybe if you remember like the key idea against any of these moves, that should be good to go, because then the moves will come naturally. I think that's quite an important tip. Always watch out for the sidelines. And with that being said, I think we can go a little bit more in details. So I think we're going to be starting with the move bishop to d7, which it might look kind of odd to some of you watching, but the idea is that black is willing to take on e4 and then play the move bishop c6. This way getting rid of the problematic French bishop. So against this setup, I decided that it would be the smartest way to take on d5, and by playing this move, we are transposing to an improved version of the exchange variation from the French defense, basically because now we will be getting this extra tempo with bishop d3, when you can see that black's move with the bishop on d7 is not really as relevant as our move is. So after e d5, we're going to be playing the move knight f3, preparing to castle short. And black has basically two big options. One of them is to play knight f6, and we're going to be starting with the other one, which is to play bishop d6, and then the idea is to follow it up with knight to e7. So here, we will be continuing with castle short, and after knight to e7, I like to play the c4 move, and just basically try to put pressure in the center. And here, black can either take or can keep things solid with c6. In case of that, we will be replying with c5, attacking the d6 bishop, and after bishop to c7, I really like the move bishop to g5 here, forcing black to create a weakness, because we are putting a lot of pressure on this e7 knight. So here black has to sort of break the pin by playing f6, and now we will just be retreating the bishop to h4, and after bishop to f5, rook e1, activating the rook and threatening to collect the bishop on f5 because the knight now is pinned. So black has to waste another tempo, let's say, and take on d3, developing our queen. And after castle shot, we can play knight c3. Black can try to finish his development with a move knight to d7, but that simply allows us to go b4, and with the idea to push on the queen side with a4 and b5. White has sort of a risk-free advantage. I also want to point out that there is quite a weak square on e6 that might be pretty tempting at some point for our rook, maybe. So white has a nice advantage here. If after c4, black decides to go for the isolated queen's pawn positions by taking on c4, we will be recapturing with the bishop, and after castle shot, rook e1, activating the rook. Black can already go for a number of moves. For example, if they start with h6, for example, stopping some knight g5 ideas that we could potentially have, then we can just play knight c3, and after bishop to g4, we go h3. This is always like a rule of thumb whenever they play this bishop g4 move. We go h3 and sort of ask the enemy bishop what's the plan, and after bishop to h5, we can even afford to go a little bit more aggressive and push g4, because black doesn't really have a lot of development, and we can afford to push the pawn in front of the king. And after bishop to g6, knight e5, now we're activating this knight, and we are also making sure that f4, f5 is going to be really unpleasant for black to meet, and then the bishop on g6, it's basically going to be trapped in a cage. So after knight c6, we're continuing with f4, bishop h7, and now we can simply play the move bishop to e3, and we can see that the white has a really nice advantage with this knight being on e5, well defended by the pawns, and now, black is really struggling to make any moves. Just keep in mind that whenever black takes on e5, we want to recapture with the d pawn, getting rid of the isolated pawn, and this way building a nice, it's not really a pawn center, but we're getting a nice pawn formation in the center of the board. So I think that should be enough to cover this h6 move. Instead of this, black can also play bishop g4, or black can also play the move knight c6. I think we're going to be starting with that one, which it's simply asking for d5, and after d5, knight b4, we can attack the knight, and after knight a6, b4. White has a substantial advantage because the knight on a6 is caught out of the game, and we can just continue our development with like bishop e2, develop the knight to d2, and white is just much better. And last but not least, black can play in this position instead of h6 and knight c6. Black can go for the pin with the move bishop to g4. And now after bishop g4, as I said, we really want to push h3, and in case of bishop h5, we can play g4 followed by bishop g6 and then knight e5 with a nice initiative for white, with very similar play to what we've seen a little bit earlier. And if bishop takes on f3, we're going to be recapturing with a queen, and after knight c6, which is hitting the d4 pawn, we can simply defend it by playing bishop to e3. Black can play queen d7, connecting the rooks, but we can play knight c3, and white has small but lasting edge thanks to the bishop pair. We can play something like rook a d1, and then we can even maybe like reroute this bishop here, make it look to the king side. In case of any knight b4, then we can just play something like bishop b1, sort of have a safe bishop on b1 that's eyeing the enemy king. So I think that should be it about the bishop d6 variation, and instead of that, black can also play the move knight f6 here, which is the more normal setup, I would say, but still we can continue with castle shot. Here black has to play the sort of sad move, which is bishop to e7, because the more active looking bishop d6 would allow this check, and now black has to go back because bishop e6 runs into knight g5 ideas, and the white is getting a very good advantage. So black has to stick to the more passive approach and play the move bishop to e7, after which we're going to be opening up the situation in the center by pushing c4. And here again, black has a choice between keeping the tension and taking on c4. We're going to be starting with c6, which is the, I would say, more solid move. But here we can just play queen b3, hitting the b7 pawn. And black, if they go for something like queen b6, white is happy to play c5. And after queen b3, a b3, we can simply play knight c3 and then play b4, b5 in the next move. Keep in mind that even if black plays a6, we can still go for b5 because the rook will be pinned on a8, so that doesn't really stop our ideas. But anyways, other than that, we can also play rook e1, bishop f4, knight e5 is just a much better queenless middle game for white. So after queen to b3, another way to defend the b7 pawn would be to drop the bishop to c8, but that also can be met with knight c3. And after castle short, we can play the move rook e1. And white just has a very nice leading development and can continue with moves such as bishop g5 and then rook a c1 with threats such as bishop takes on f6, and then the d5 pawn is going to be undefended. So white has a nice advantage in this scenario as well. And instead of this c6 move, we can move on to what happens if black does take on c4, going for the IQP positions, which we're going to be taking with the bishop. And after castles, knight c3. Knight c6 is a move for black, but after h3, this is a really important move, stopping black from from not pushing but playing bishop to g4. Then it's kind of hard for him to find nice square for the bishop, because bishop f5 can be met with rook e1. And this is already a very nice position, because the bishop on f5, as good as it may look right now, is actually a target, because we're going to be playing d5 followed by knight d4, gaining a tempo with a very nice position for white. So instead of knight c6, bishop g4 is a little bit more critical, but that can be met by playing h3, attacking the bishop. And if bishop h5, as you can see, we are relying on this very aggressive g4 move, because white just has that extra tempi that I mentioned in the beginning of the line, and this really gives us the important move that we need in order to be able to play this aggressive on the king side. So knight e5 is completely justified, and now the big fat is to push f4 followed by f5, and here black can try to complicate things with c5. But we can take on c5. I think that is the best move. I think d5 could also be playable, but I just think d takes on c5 is a much better move from an objective point of view. And after bishop takes on c5, we're going to be eliminating the enemy bishop. And black has a choice. They can either trade queens now by taking on d1, or the other one would be to take on g6 immediately. I think we're going to be starting with the queen trade, which we're going to be taking back with the rook. And after pawn takes, we have this very strong move g5, attacking the knight. Something like knight ft7, for example, can be met by bishop to d5, and black is losing because knight c6, we can take it, and then the d7 knight will drop, and there's also no good way for black to defend the b7 pawn. So black has to go for knight h7 instead, which again looks kind of passive, which we can just play knight e4. Attacking the bishop with a very nice position for white, thanks to the bishop pair and the nice lead in development, and also this knight is kind of passive. So instead of queen takes on d1, h takes on g6 is another move that black has. But here, I think you can also try to pause the video and take this as an exercise in case you are haven't done your tactics for the day. Here is a good moment where white can play bishop takes on f7, highlighting the fact that rook takes on f7 will be dropping the queen, so king takes on f7 is the only move. But now after queen b3, we can see that the enemy king is actually very vulnerable, and therefore king has to go to e8. But now after rook e1, bishop e7, bishop f4, I think we can simply stop here, despite the fact that white is down a piece, but we have a really nice attack. The enemy king is just under fire. We can also pick up the b7 pawn at any point. Notice that knight bd7 will allow bishop d6 ideas, and yeah, white is just completely winning in this position. So I just want you to remember this cute idea with bishop takes on f7. And with that being said, I think we can move on to the other move, which is after h3, is to take on f3. We have to take with a queen. And here black has two moves. One of them is to take on d4 immediately, and the other one is to play knight c6 with the idea to take on d4 with a knight. But we can simply play rook to d1 here. And in case of knight takes on d4, we can collect the b7 pawn. Black can play c5, strengthening the knight in the center of the board. But we can simply play around it with bishop to f4. And after queen d7, we can just trade. And after knight takes, can play the move knight d5. And all of a sudden, this knight on d5 is actually much more useful than this one on d4. So combined with the fact that white has the bishop pair, white has much better position. In the game Nepomniachtchi against Almaty from 2016, and also Jan ended up winning the game. So after queen f3, black can also go for this pawn grab on d4, but we can simply play this intermezzo with queen takes on b7, hitting the rook in the corner, and after knight b to d7. Now we can keep the bishop by playing bishop b3. If you're a fan of fancy play, taking on f7 is another alternative here. But after king takes, queen b3, this is leading to quite of a complex game. It's not really as strong as it was in the previous case, so I won't really advise you to go for this. But I mean, if you're looking for a fun game, just wanted to let you know that this is a possibility. Instead, I do recommend the move bishop b3 here. And after knight c5, for example, this is giving up the c7 pawn. And after bishop to d6, we have a very important move to play knight b5 here. Because we're forcing an endgame that is quite nice for white. Because after bishop takes 1c7, we can collect the enemy queen. And after rook d8, I really like to just defend the knight with the move bishop b3, also completing our development. And after knight takes on b3, I really like the move a takes on b3, opening up the rook and also keeping an eye on the enemy pawn on a7 with a very nice edge for white. So instead of this knight c5 move that we've just seen, black can also try queen e5 here, defending the c7 pawn and maybe preparing some ideas to create a battery with bishop to d6. Here we have a very strong move, which is knight to d5. And for example, the idea would be to mate bishop to d6 with bishop f4, stopping the checkmating frat, and then we're ready to trade the enemy bishop with a much better position for white. So black is not going to play that. Instead, knight takes on d5 is a better move, but that can be met with queen takes d5. And you can see that we are heading for an endgame where white has a better pawn structure and also the bishop pair. So after bishop d6, we can just trade queens off, play rook e1, and after bishop f6. This has to be played because bishop a4 is quite an annoying move, hitting the knight, and then the bishop will be kind of loose. So after bishop f6, the only problem that we still have left is that we need to develop this bishop, but you can see that this one is eyeing the b2 pawn, so we can just play the move rook b1, and we're ready to develop the bishop on the next move with a nice position for white, thanks to the bishop pair and the kind of ugly enemy pawn structure that black has on the queen side. So I think that should pretty much be it for this bishop d7 move. I don't really expect you to see it that often, but you know, I think this is just like a nice way to show that you know, even if you face it, generally you can go for this transposition to the ed5 range where you are up a tempo and white keeps a nice position. So in this position after bishop d3, another quite tricky move that black has at his disposal, and it's not as popular, is this small a6 move, which has actually like many points. First of all, we could actually play something like e5 here and transpose to the advanced variation of the French defense. But I, sort of preferred another move because I just think it's a little bit better from an objective point of view. Although if you are comfortable playing the advanced variation of the French, I think e5 is actually playable move in this position. It's not really my main recommendation, but I also want to show you what happens if you play the most natural move, knight f3, because that will simply completely justify black's idea, which is to take on e4 now, and after bishop takes e4. Knight f6 is the move, attacking the e4 bishop, and after bishop to d3. Black is very much in business with the c5 move, and you can see that this a6 move is quite useful, covering this important b5 square, and black is just getting very nice play in the center, and we can say that black already equalized. So yeah, just after such a small move as a6, if you are not careful and if you play the supernatural looking knight f3, you can already find yourself not really in some trouble, but you can be struggling to get the usual play. So instead, I want you to really remember that we can meet this a6 move in sort of a similar fashion to what we've just looked at against bishop to d7. And this would be to take on d5 in this position, with the main idea that we are heading towards an improved version of the exchange variation, because we have, after he takes on d5, taking with the queen is never really a good option for black, because we can just play knight f3 and then attack the queen. So I just wanted to mention that quickly. So black is always taking with the pawn on d5, but you can see now that we have sort of the main position for the exchange variation, but we have this bishop d3 and a6 moves on the board that are included. So yeah, usually when dealing with the sidelines, you have this sort of choice that you can go to some improved lines, as here in this particular case we have this exchange variation of the French. But of course, it's kind of tricky to do if you're not a big opening expert and you're not comfortable playing a lot of stuff. So this is why it's important to study these videos. But I just wanted to make a quick note that this is usually how we deal with the sidelines. We can just go for improved versions of some big lines. So I think that's something nice now to keep in mind. And after pawn takes on d5, we're going to be playing the move knight f3, and quite obvious that this move is much more useful than this one. But that's going to be also the case if, for example, black goes for the knight c6 plan. So here, introducing you a little bit to the theory of the exchange variation of the French defense. There are many ways that black can develop. One of them would be to play bishop d6 followed by knight e7. I mean, this is I'm talking about a traditional line without a6 on the board. Black can play like bishop d6 with knight e7. Black can play like knight f6, bishop d6, and basically try to set up the pieces, play in the mirror, just copycatting what white does. And another interesting line that black has in normal exchange variation is that they can go for this knight c6 ideas with moves such as bishop d6, knight e7, bishop g4, queen d7, and then long castle. And this is usually how the stronger players are trying to play while facing lower rated oppositions, with the idea to play for a win as black. And that is actually quite a powerful plan, and I implemented it in many occasions on the black side, and yeah, I think it's quite powerful. It's not really like the only system that you can use to play for a win as black, but that's not really, the main topic of this video, I guess. But the nice point that I'm trying to make here is that in all those lines, it's going to be a pawn race. So black is going to be trying to push the pawns on this side with g5 and h5. And white is going to be pushing the pawns on the other side, on the queen side, with b4, a4. And here you can see that this a6 move, it's sort of breaking one of the very important rules when you have this opposite castling game, that you shouldn't be moving the pawns on the side where your opponent is attacking. So here, how would this translate is that we can play b5, and it's going to be it's just going to be so much more effective than it would have been with this pawn on a7 here. So it's simply just much better to just take the pawn, put it back on a7. But yeah, I unfortunately, black cannot really do that. And yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, this is going to be a much more improved version for white. And we're also going to go through the moves a little bit. But, you know, if you just understand these things, then the moves are going to come naturally. So we're going to be playing c3, avoiding any knight b4 nonsense, and also preparing to push b4 at some point. So bishop d6, castles, knight e7, rook e1, bishop goes to g4, pinning our knight. And after this move, we're usually happy to play the move knight b to d2. Here black can choose whether he's playing for long castle or short castle. If queen d7, we're going to be playing queen c2. I think it's just a very nice move to sidestep the pin and prepare the aggression on the queen side. We're basically waiting for black to show his hand, because notice that in this position short castle is not going to be a thing, because bishop takes on h7 would be possible, because the pawn will be no longer defended. And after castle's long, we have this very strong move of b4. After king b8, we can push a4. If f6, we can attack the enemy bishop by playing h3 first, and after bishop to h5. By the way, there's no need to be afraid of moves such as bishop takes on h3, because we can simply take it and then take with the g pawn. And if queen takes, for example, something like this, then we can just play bishop f1, get it to g2. There's simply no attack for black. And if bishop h5, this bishop a3 move is really nice. If you go b5 immediately, black can try to sort of create a fortress here after b takes on a6. Can play b6. I'm not so sure if the fortress term is so appropriate for this position, but this is like kind of a nice way for black to sort of sidestep the attack a little bit, and we have a pretty complex position on the board. So instead it's just like better to start with bishop a3. Main idea being that after g5, we can go b5. Notice that bishop takes on a3 will allow taking on c6 intermezzo. So black has to move the knight. And here the important move is that we can, you know, no longer go for ba6, b6, but we can play bishop b4 first. And now this knight on a5 is actually quite vulnerable. And after something like bishop takes pawn, takes knight c4, we can just take on a6 first, and then we're going to be taking on c4 on the next move with a completely winning position for white. So you can see that going for long castle is actually going to backfire quite badly for black. And therefore, after knight b to d2, another way of playing is the move h6, preparing to castle short. Please keep in mind that castle short will allow this nice bishop takes on h7, and if king takes, then we will be playing knight g5 and then collecting the bishop. So black has to prepare it by playing h6 if they want to castle short. So here we can just play knight to f1, heading towards g3, and then we can play h3, trying to grab the bishop pair. And after knight f1, black can castle. We're going to continue our plan by playing knight g3, and we're happy to see something like bishop takes on g3, because we can just take towards the center. And after queen d7, we can play queen c2, since we're not afraid of any bishop takes f3, because we can just take with a pawn, and we have a very healthy king position, and white won a nice game here in the Van Forest against Filipovic in Basel 2017 because of the bishop pair advantage. So yeah, with that being said, I think we can move on to the knight f3 and now the more normal knight f6 line, because here we're going to be playing castle short, and black has to stick with this passive bishop to e7, because as I said, bishop d6 allows rook e1, and then it's going to be quite uncomfortable for black to deal with this check, since bishop to e6 will run into knight g5 business. So yeah, if they do this, we do that. And if bishop to e7, then we can play bishop f4, and we already have a much more active dash squared bishop if we look, at the other one on e7. So after castles, we can just play knight b to d2. And, despite the fact that there is a symmetrical position on the board, I just really want to draw your attention to the fact that our pieces are just much more active than our opponents are. because look at the bishops. I mean, this bishop on e7 is just passive, and we can, meet any like bishop d6 with knight e5 ideas already, and white is in great shape. So black usually goes bishop g4, but we can play h3. Again, we would be very happy to see something like bishop takes on f3, because that would simply give us the bishop pair for free, and we can just recapture with the knight with a much better position. And after bishop h5, we can just play the small move c3, strengthening the center. And after knight b to d7, I like this move, queen b3, hitting the b7 pawn. And after b5, we can just play knight e5 now that the pin was broken. And white has a very nice position. c6 square is kind of weak. Knight c6 ideas. If knight takes on e5, we can take both with a bishop or with the pawn. Anyways, if black does not take, we can play something like rook fe1, and then we have even ideas to use this hook on b5 by pushing a4. So white has a very nice advantage. So I think this should pretty much set you up for meeting this a6 move, and we can move on to another sideline that black has, which is, quite similarly looking to what we've just seen, only that we move to the other side of the board. So black goes h6, and this actually is not as stupid as it may look. I mean, the sidelines, again, if you don't really like think about them, trying to find the real point, they all look kind of pointless. But I will also show you that this move has some hidden threats of its own. As for example, if we are playing the most natural knight f3, black gets a nice version of the Rubinstein after taking on e4 and then playing knight f6. Because black is getting a Rubinstein variation where there are no bishop g5 moves, which are actually quite a critical asset that white has. So knight f3, not the greatest in this position. Also playing knight c3 sort of crossed my mind as well, but black can play knight c6, and we're gonna be transposing to the Guimard variation, which, again, like if you do like a lot of research from this position, and you just spend a big amount of time analyzing this particular line, I think, maybe white can get an advantage if you dig deeper here enough with the engines. But then, I mean, I really want to make this repertoire as practical as I can, and, I don't want to be giving you extensive lines against, the rare options, because I really want you to be able to play this repertoire in a practical game. So against knight c6, going for this could be a viable alternative against this move, Against h6, knight c3 could be a viable alternative, but I think it requires quite an unnecessary amount of theory that you need to learn. So instead, I like to play knight e2. I'm gonna give you that, but I also quickly want to mention that taking on d5 is, playable, but is actually not as great as it would be against a6, because as crazy as it may look, this h6 move is actually much more useful in the exchange variation than a6 would have been. So this is a position where it makes a lot more sense to have it on the board. I mean, I don't really think, objectively speaking, white has such a great position as it has against a6. I mean, if you really want to simplify your life, maybe you can go for this line, but I wouldn't really recommend it, okay? I wouldn't really recommend playing this. But instead, I really like the move knight e2 here, which I think is just a very nice fix to this line. Because, for example, if black takes on e4, we can take with a bishop, and after knight f6, bishop f3, we just have the normal lines with d takes on e4, but, we just got an extra tempi, because black has played this h6 move, which is not really that relevant at all. So this is already much better for white, but instead black can do some other things as well. As for example, after knight e2, knight f6 would be a move sort of similar to the Tarrasch variation in the French. And here we can just play e5, attacking the knight. After knight e7, I really like the move knight f4, which is immediately threatening to take on e6, because there will be a very unpleasant threat of going queen h5. So black has to step away from that, play knight b6, creating, some sort of defense over that e6 square, because the bishop is now covering it. But we can simply play c3, strengthening our center, preparing against c5 in advance. And after c5, we can simply castle short, and knight c6, which is attacking the d4 pawn, can be met by bishop e3, keeping our solid center nicely protected. And after bishop e7, we can play knight e2 and meet short castle with knight h5, with a very nice attacking setup, because we can play queen g4 on the next move, and then it's going to be quite tricky for black to defend against our checkmating threats. As for example, let's just say somehow we get another move to make, so we play queen g4. If black tries to defend against the mate with g6, then we can simply sacrifice the bishop by playing bishop takes on g6, then take with a queen on g6, and then queen g7 will be a checkmate. So yeah, I think that's quite an obvious tactic, but I think, it's nice to keep in mind if you're not so familiar with it. With that being said, we can move on to what I think it's one of the maybe main lines of the sideline. I think maybe you can call it this way, which is the move c5. And I'm going to be showing you my recommendation, and then I'm also going to give you a little bit of an insight of how I feel about the upcoming positions, because I really like to take on d5 here and play c4. And this looks like a little bit crazy, because we're going to be having multiple trades in the center, and then we will be having this type of symmetrical positions where white is ahead a tempo, or has a little bit of an initiative in terms of being the better developed side. But growing up and, trying to climb up the ladder, while I was rated around somewhere, maybe 2200, I always had this issue of whenever I was playing someone lower rated, I just wanted to have an unbalanced position, because this way I was feeling quite comfortable that I can go for the outplay. And then, I was sort of afraid of playing this good positions, just because they were really symmetrical, and I've considered that it's going to be much harder to win, because the opponent can go for many trades, and then it's going to be a little bit harder to win the end games. But now that I sort of gathered a little bit more experience, I can tell you that it is actually much easier to win these symmetrical positions, where you are better than winning very complex kind of positions, very imbalanced positions that you have no edge, that are complicated. Okay, just play the good positions, despite the fact that they're like symmetrical. They have a symmetrical character. I'm not sure if this is really you. Maybe it's just maybe it's just one of the issues that I had. But I thought maybe this would help some of you watching that potentially feel the same sort of fear while playing lower rated opponents. So you shouldn't. And after c4, black has two ways of playing that I covered. cd4 is one of them, and we're going to be playing knight takes on d4. I think going for short castle is also possible to postpone taking, but let's just keep it simple for now. And after pawn takes on c4, we can take with the bishop, and after knight f6, castles, bishop e7, we can play knight c3, and white has a very nice lead-in development. We can play like rook e1, bishop e3, something like queen f3 to come, maybe even h3, control the g4 square, bring the other rook to the center, and white just has a nice position overall. So instead of this, after c4, knight f6 would be another way of playing for black, but again, the positions are quite similar, since we can just play knight bc3, and after taking on c4, bishop takes on c4, bishop e7, castles. I like to play h3 here, simply preparing to play bishop e3 without allowing any annoying knight jumps to g4. And after knight c6, as I said, we're going to be defending our pawn with bishop e3, and after knight takes, bishop takes on d4. White is just a very nice, small but stable edge because of being the better developed side, and our bishops are just much more active because, just look at this beautiful bishop compared with that one, and also think about the fact that this bishop is also kind of struggling to find a safe square. I can maybe play something like queen d3, rook a d1, bring our rook to the open files, and then maybe even like sidestep with like queen f3, keep an eye on the b7 pawn, and black will be sort of struggling here despite looking like he has the easy moves due to the symmetry. So I think we can pretty much move on from this h6 move, and we do have left another pawn move for this video. We do also have the f5 move, which is really dubious just because it's weakening the e5 square. But f5 being a dubious move doesn't necessarily mean that we have to skip it. I mean, again, like, you can really skip it if you don't feel like this is ever getting played against you, or if you're like comfortable exploiting the weak e5 square. But I've actually done a lot of research about this, and I found out that a lot of players tend to play this in lower brackets, especially according to the Leech's online database. So yeah, I thought it's actually quite useful to have it here, and I recommend it to just take on f5, pawn takes, and play knight f3. And what we're basically going to do, we're going to be castling short, and then we're going to be putting pressure in the center with c4 followed by knight c3. So this is going to be our main game plan. So knight f6 can follow. Here, if, for example, bishop d6, trying to be more aggressive, we can just play rook e1. And if black tries to be ultra aggressive with knight e4, that's gonna backfire pretty soon after c4. And if c6, take on d5, pawn takes, and now queen b3. Keeping an eye on this pawn. We don't want to necessarily fall for queen takes d5, bishop takes on h2. But for example, it already makes it really tough for black to castle, because then queen takes d5 will come with a check. So that's gonna be a different story. So black plays knight c6. We're not going to be rushing with queen takes d5, but playing knight c3 instead. And now you can see that knight takes d5 is actually quite a big threat. So black has to defend it, but we can simply play knight e5. And the difference between this e5 square and this e4 one is that we can just play f3 at any time and kick this knight. So you can see that black is here left with just a chronic weakness, I would say, on e5, but we can kick the enemy knight from e4 at any time. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this super aggressive bishop d6 move. So we're gonna be now covering the bishop e7 one. We're gonna be playing rook e1, activating our rook, and after castle short, we are ready to strike in the center with c4. Black plays c6, but we go knight c3. With the idea to continue with queen b3, as I said. Black has two main plans that I've picked here. One of them is to play bishop b4, with the idea to get rid of this knight and then play knight e4. But here I think bishop d5 is a very smart move. Getting rid of this knight and preparing to play queen b3, and then the d5 pawn is actually going to be under a lot of pressure. So after something like h6, we can eliminate the knight, take on d5 once. And here black has to already include bishop takes on c3 because taking allows knight takes on d5. So bishop takes on c3 has to be included. But after pawn takes, queen b3. The d5 pawn is very vulnerable, as you can see. And we're ready to also play rook e5 on the next move to increase the pressure if needed. So that should be it for the bishop b4 move. Knight e4 is the other way of playing, but we're going to be playing queen b3, hitting the d5 pawn directly. And after knight takes, black has to already take because there are no really good moves. Again, bishop e6 is not really a move since b7 is always hanging, so there's not really much that black can do about the d5 pawn. So knight takes on c3, pawn takes, bishop f6 could be a line, but now bishop to a3 is quite quite awkward to face. And the very beautiful line that I found out was rook f7. We can take on d5. Pawn takes, and now queen takes on d5. It was a very funny looking move with the idea that queen takes allows rook e8, rook f8, and then we get a really nice checkmate because the rook is defended and the enemy king has no squares. So I think this is really more than enough against this dubious f5 move. And we can finally move on to actually what I believe and what I consider to be the trickiest side line that black has, and I actually faced this more than once in my games. I have to say, in my online games, I face this quite often, but I actually got very good positions, and I scored very well, and because I managed to remember what I was supposed to do, because I've covered it for the course, obviously. But I also can say that my friends, I got very nice wins against this particular one from the games that they've sent me. So when black plays knight c6, we're gonna be playing c3. This is actually very important move, and yeah, just go c3 here. And the idea is that we're no longer giving black any knight before ideas. So keep in mind this move, quite annoying. Knight before, eliminating bishop, e4 pawn will be under attack. That's gonna be quite annoying. So yeah, we're gonna be playing c3, both defending the pawn and avoiding knight b4. And here black's point is that they're trying to take they're trying to push e5. Taking on e4 is also an option that black has, but that is actually just leading to a nice version for white of the Rubinstein variation, because the knight on c6 is not such a well-placed piece, because after knight f6, bishop g5, black usually prefers to have this knight on d7, but here you can see it's already committed to the c6 square, which is actually just great news for us, because the knight is also staying, it's kind of blocking the c5 pawn, the c7 pawn that's usually trying to get to c5 in this variation. So we can just play bishop g5, and now we can just take on f6. We can afford giving up the bishop pair in this particular case, because black is struggling to do anything with the light square bishop, and this is just a common theme for the variation. So bishop takes on f6, we're developing the knight, playing knight f3, castles, knight e7, black has to do some kind of reroute, because the spaces are really clumsy. You can just continue developing with natural moves like knight b to d2. And for example, after c6, we can just play rook e1. And an easy plan would be to play queen c2, bring the rook into the center with rook a b1, and then just play knight e5, activate a knight. Maybe even support it with f4 if allowed. And yeah, we're just slowly putting a lot of pressure on black's setup, and white has a very nice advantage. So after knight b to d2, black can also try rook b8 with ideas to play b6 and then bishop b7, sort of solve the issue of the French bishop. But we're not really gonna give it black such an easy time, and we're gonna be playing queen a4, hitting the a7 pawn directly. So black has to take care of it by pushing a6. Now I can sort of activate the rook with rook fe1. And for example, we would be quite happy to see b5 on the board, because this move, despite it being looking quite active, we can just play queen c2, hitting the h7 pawn, and after something like h6, we can play knight b3 and say, well, you just created quite a big weakness on c5 that we can use. Now you can really see the downside of having played the b5 move. And yeah, instead of this b5 move, black can also just play b6, but we can just bring our rook to the center of the board with rook d1. Please keep in mind that bishop b7 is not really a move now, because we can take, and then the a6 pawn will drop. And yeah, other than that, we can just maybe play something like queen c2, play knight c4, bring the knight to e5, and it's just a very nice and comfortable position to play for white overall. So yeah, this should be enough to cover d takes on e4. It's just an improved version of the Rubinstein French for white. And now it's time to actually focus on the more mainstream stuff, and which is the move e5. And already, if you are sort of surprised by this, maybe you could be struggling to find the best continuation. But after playing knight f3, ed4, here is just super important to play the move short castle. So if you remember that, I think you should be good to go. But before we jump into the main line, I want to quickly point out that going bishop g4 here looks kind of tempting for black, but queen to b3 is actually a very nice way of hitting both the b7 pawn and the d5 one. So after something like bishop takes, we can just recapture. And after knight e7, I really like, instead of going for the greedy queen b7, just play bishop e3, strengthening our center. And after queen d7, d takes on e5 is very strong, with the idea that knight takes is met by bishop to e2, introducing f4 ideas. And after pawn takes on e4, we can take. And after castle long, knight to d2. It looks like, black's got like a sort of playable position, but after knight c6, you can just play castles long. And with the idea to play knight c4 on the next move, white is actually just much better, thanks to the bishop pair. And this is not really that popular, but I thought, it's nice to mention this bishop g4 move, just to not be super surprised by it. But yeah, most of the people are going to take on d4 here, expecting you to take with a pawn and maybe play for the isolated queen's pawn positions. But here is just very clever to go for short castle, and I will show you why. Because if black goes greedy here by taking on c3, we can open up the position by taking on d5. And after c takes on b2, we can play this rook e1 check, knight e7, take on b2, and after queen takes on d5, we can play knight c3. So you can already see that we have already developed all of our pieces. We have like 5 pieces developed, and then it's going to be our turn to move. Then the enemy king is just caught in the center. Also after queen to d8, we can just play queen e2. And, despite the fact that we're down 2 pawns, white is just like completely winning after something like rook a d1 and the next move. And black is just unable to finish his development. So instead of taking on c3, bishop e7 is another way of playing. But we can just take on d5. And after queen takes on d5, we can take on d4. No reason to actually be afraid of knight takes on d4, because this would allow a common trap. We go bishop to b5, and now we're picking up the queen because of the check. So this is a nice way to win a queen. And in case of bishop to g4, pinning our knight, we can play knight c3, hitting the queen. If bishop takes on f3, white is doing very well. After knight takes on d5, bishop d1, knight takes on c7. Then we're going to be collecting the rook with a very nice position for white. And black has to instead sidestep the attack, play queen d7. But now h3 is really nice, forcing the bishop to just make a decision. And here, knight takes on d4 would allow queen takes b7 with a very good position for white. White is simply completely winning. And in case of knight f6, we can just play bishop to e3 and meet short castle with rook fd1. With a really nice position for white. We can consider playing something like rook ac1, bishop b1, and even maybe push d5 at the right time. So instead of bishop to g4, knight f6 is a bit of a smarter move. But again, we can just play knight c3. Black has to move the queen, but now h3 is really clever. So this is a nice move in this type of positions. I think you can try to maybe pause whenever you have the time while playing the structures and think about what black wants to do with the bishop. And I'm not saying to always play h3, but when your development is on point and you can afford to play it, it could be a very nice move to make. Simply giving black a very hard time developing. So after castle short, I really like playing a3, just stopping any typical knight b4 to d5. And after bishop e6, I like the move rook e1, rook e8. Taking on e6, by the way, is a really thematic sacrifice, which I think is playable. But just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to be playing bishop c2, and we're going to be following it up with bishop g5, queen d3, rook d1. Already we'll have threats such as bishop takes on f6, followed by queen takes on h7. And yeah, white just has a very nice position overall. So after castle short, we're going to be coming down to my main line, which is taking on e4. And here the point is to take on e4. For example, if black plays bishop to d6, we're quite happy to take on c6 and then take on d4 with a queen, hitting the g7 pawn. And with the idea being that knight f6 is going to be met with rook e1 check, bishop e6, and as a common theme for this video, bishop e6 is always met with this knight g5, simply highlighting the fact that black has problems on the e file. Castle short can be met by takes, and here it's important to not rush with rook takes on e6, because black is getting a lot of compensation, but we can just play knight e2, bring our knight to f3, and we can, collect one of these ugly pawns a little bit later. So just no need to rush, get the knight to f3, make sure your king is safe, and yeah, we're just much better in, statically speaking, on long term. So after taking, knight f6 is the main move. I think I have also faced this in my game as well. And after bishop takes on c6, we can take on d4, attack the c6 pawn. And here, for example, bishop to d7 would allow a very nice queen f3 move, putting pressure on the c6 pawn. And after bishop c5, rook e1 is very strong. King f8 can be met with knight takes, and white is simply up a pawn. And after the c5, a very nice move, if you can remember it, is queen e2. And after queen e7, queen c4 is super strong. And we can simply play like bishop g5, knight e2 on the next move, and then rook e1 with a very nice advantage. And the main point is that cd4 runs into queen c6, and we can pick up the rook on the next move with a winning position for white. So yeah, I think that should sum things up for this video, for this first chapter dedicated to the sidelines that black has against bishop to d3. As I said, I don't think that you should really focus too much on remembering the precise moves, because as I said, you will be facing some of these variations once in a while, so it's going to be virtually impossible to remember these lines. Unless, you have some kind of crazy memory. So yeah, I'm telling you from my experience, just kind of knowing that this exists and, remembering like the big ideas. Like, for example, you can remember after knight c6, black is threatening knight b4, so we play c3, and then you can also remember this idea that you're going for quick development. So just taking this sort of small mental notes that you play c3 and then you go for quick development can help you to just find the right moves over the board. You don't have to go and learn it like a crazy robot or something like that. And for example, another way of making your life simpler would be like just against h6, you remember to play knight e2, and then you should be sort of good to go. Again, like I'm not sure how many people will play c5, but again, if you can also remember this idea, but generally just remembering knight e2 here. I think it's sort of enough against this h6 move. And for example, against a6, here it's really nice if you can understand that. You get a much better version of the exchange French. If you like just take on d5 here, the same against bishop to d7, I would be completely satisfied if I was your coach. So yeah. Just try to remember these small ideas, and you will be simplifying your life quite a lot, and also hopefully improve your results and win more games in the French defense. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Take care.